Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the last edition of the DGAP Balkan Breakfast Series for this year, during which we will try to give a strategic outlook on key challenges and developments. After our speakers will provide their inputs, we will open the floor, so get your questions ready or feel free to write them in the chat. As we are usually under Chatham House rules, I just want to make sure everyone knows we are on the record this time, and we are also recording this and we'll publish it on the DGAP YouTube channel later. So let's dive in. What are we talking about? So we have seen that, especially in the last couple of months, the Commission, Gert-Jan Koopmans of DG NEAR and others have been very positive, especially during the presentation of the Enlargement Package. There was this insistence that enlargement is back on track. It's again a priority, but when we look at the report itself, it looks a bit more like business as usual. And even though we have this mantra of enlargement as a geopolitical imperative, we also see a distinct lack of urgency among many of the member states who have on paper agreed that enlargement is necessary and will happen, but are very disjunct when it comes to the vision of how and in what order and in what way this enlargement is going to happen, which of course is also a problem for the EU's credibility and capability as a foreign policy actor in the Western Balkans, but also beyond. On the positive side, let's say we have an incoming new commission, including a new foreign policy team that aims at turning a page, increasing engagement further, and using the full toolbox, including the newest tools, namely the new growth plan for the Western Balkans, an upcoming growth plan for Moldova, the Ukraine facility, and also we have this phrase making the rounds, including in the official documents, of gradual integration, which we will also discuss. But at the same time, of course, we face vast new challenges in the areas of security, democracy, trade, climate, social cohesion, and especially. And this is further amplified by an incoming second Trump presidency. So the big question is, of course, how EU enlargement policy will feature in the next year, and how this will interact with this very, very complex policy environment. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to State Minister Lührmann for her initial remarks. I have two questions to start us off. So the first one is looking ahead at next year's European Council Summit. What are open issues on enlargement and which outcomes do you expect for the Western Balkans concretely? My first question. Second question, you have been one of the driving forces in Europe, arguably, to bring the enlargement reform debate on track. What has been achieved so far in your view, and what do you expect from the next legislature? The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. Yeah, indeed. So to address your first question, we will see a European Council taking place under a new president who is also very much aware of the geopolitical dynamics. And I heard he also already had a meeting also with representatives of the Western Balkans and is very keen on keeping up the dynamic of the enlargement process that we've seen during the last year. Because unlike maybe your sort of approach to this, I actually think that we have really seen new dynamic in the enlargement portfolio during the course of the last year with the opening of negotiations with Ukraine and Moldova. We have seen closing and opening of chapters with other countries. We will actually see next week the opening of negotiation cluster 6 with Albania. And also we will see, we have seen chapters closed with Montenegro. And here additional IGCs, these intergovernmental conferences that are important milestones. We will see them with Montenegro and Albania on December 16th and 17th. And I think that really indicates that once countries really go on a reform pathway towards the European Union is ready to deliver and to also take the country one step closer towards the EU. We've also seen progress with the growth plan that I'm sure we'll discuss a bit further for the Western Balkans. We have seen the unblocking of CEFTA this year, the important single market for or regional market for the Western Balkans. So I think we've seen indeed a lot of dynamic, and I fully expect the Polish presidency next spring to continue with this dynamic. On the issue of reform, as you know, it's our position that reforms and enlargement need to go in parallel so that the EU is really ready as soon as the candidate countries are ready to join the EU. And here we had, I think, 2 or maybe even 3 European councils confirming this position. So and the last one now in June, saying that these 2 processes need to go in parallel, and actually tasking also both the Council as well as the Commission to keep on working on this. Here the Commission will present some pre-enlargement reports to get the EU institutions and policies ready for enlargement in spring. But unfortunately, other than that, during this semester, we haven't seen much progress on the reform end of things, also because of the gap in the sort of the legislative cycle of the EU, and maybe also a touch because France and Germany were busy with other things. But I fully expect the EU to live up to the commitments that we made now in spring to keep these processes in parallel. Also, the new commissioners have this integrated into their briefs, so they are sort of task sheets that they got from President von der Leyen. So I'm looking forward to some new dynamic in also the reform debate, because for me it's very clear that if we want this enlargement to really be a success, we need to have reformed policies and reformed budget and a reformed governance structure of the EU.
Thank you very much. If I can challenge you a little bit on that, I mean, we have seen opening of chapters. Of course, there needs to be some progress on that, but I think there's also a strong keenness on the side of the EU and the member states to show that progress is happening. So, and how far is this? Can we really say this is progress when it comes to the big issues that we are still facing? I mean, we have a lot of countries that are still blocked in the process, blocking themselves. And then we also see on the side of the member states that there are less than on enlargement when it comes to the Western Balkans. In some cases, there's more of a focus on bilateral deals. Very prominently, of course, the Memorandum of Understanding for Lithuania and Serbia, co-signed by the German Chancellor, but also, of course, deals with Albania and Kosovo when it comes to migration. So how do you see this featuring into this? And do you really think that the member states are ready to change course on enlargement in the Western Balkans?
Yes, actually, the Memorandum of Understanding on raw materials was signed between Serbia and the EU. So it's sort of a multilateral, or an EU is the counterpart here, and I think. Well, we need to work on several areas, right? We need, of course, improved also bilateral relationships. We need to strengthen also economic ties in the region. That's why Germany has worked so hard on getting this agreement on CEFTA, on the regional market across the signing line now 2 months ago on the margins of the Berlin Process Summit. Because I think if the countries in the region move closer together, then it will also be easier to integrate into the European Union. Yes, and indeed, there's a lot of light that I focused on a lot in my initial remarks, but there is, of course, also shadow, and in particularly, I mean, if we look to Bosnia and Herzegovina, for instance, where we haven't seen much progress since the granting of the candidate status, actually, and the parties are not even able to agree on the things necessary to get the growth plan into place. So it's really yeah, a pity and I think also very worrisome that we haven't seen more progress in Bosnia and Herzegovina, for instance. And also when we look to Serbia, it's very clear that progress on the key chapters, the fundamentals, the rule of law, is lacking. And for good reasons, we've said that progress in accession negotiations will be determined by these rule of law issues, and we clearly address this. For instance, election reforms according to the ODIHR recommendations, the voter registry, also media issues, justice and accountability, and also the alignment in the common foreign and security policy, where we are only at about 58%. That's clearly not enough for a country aspiring to be a member of the European Union.
Thanks. And very last question for now. As you mentioned, Serbia and the progress, we have seen the repeated recommendation by the Commission to open Cluster 3 for Serbia. I know that this is still being discussed here in the committees by the member states. And as you mentioned, there are some issues that make a lot of member states hesitant. What is the German position on this, if you can share?
Yeah, I think as I've indicated earlier, we don't see enough progress, particularly on the fundamental chapter. So we don't think that we have achieved the necessary benchmarks yet.
Great, thank you for these very frank remarks. I will now move on to Mr. Hagleitner to share his outlook for 2025. As we mentioned, there are very high expectations for the incoming Commission to pave the way for enlargement by the end of this decade, for at least for several countries. What can we expect here in terms of a concrete strategy, especially when it comes to gradual integration? So where do you see concrete areas and also room to maneuver between the member states, as we see that the Western Balkans are already integrated or to a certain extent docked onto several policy areas? That's my first question. And the second, what will be the main deliverable for EU enlargement in 2025 when it comes to the Western Balkans?
Yes, good morning, colleagues. Thank you very much for having me. I hope you see me as okay, it works and you hear me. No, thanks a lot. And I think I agree with nearly everything Minister Lührmann just said about enlargement in the Western Balkans. I mean, the momentum you mentioned at the beginning, I think it is in fact real. If you look back, it has been quite a year in terms of enlargement. And it shows that the fundamentals. First of all, are key for moving forward. We have seen Montenegro meeting what we call these interim benchmarks and rule of law, which opens the way towards closing chapters, and which we're hoping to do, as the minister said, next week at an intergovernmental conference. We've had Albania opening the fundamentals cluster, which now paves the way for opening other clusters. And again, we hope to have an intergovernmental conference next week. So that shows, first of all, that those countries, that there are countries that are able to use the opportunities provided by the overall context. I mean, there is a geopolitical context, but it is a fact that enlargement is and has to remain a merit-based process with the fundamentals at its core. So I think that is as a starting point for the momentum. I would also add that we're usually very cautious in referring to any timelines. in this year's enlargement package, speaking about Montenegro and Albania, we have noted the ambitions of both countries for closing their accession negotiations. Be very clear, this is their target, not ours, but we have made clear that we are ready to support them, provided, of course, they meet all the conditions. So in light of all of that, I think on the enlargement agenda, we'll see quite a number of intergovernmental conferences in the course of next year. Also, I would, the minister already mentioned it, now speaking about the new commission, I think one point which really is important is that in the new college, all members of the commission, not just Commissioner for Enlargement, Kos, have enlargement as their priorities in the mission letters given to them by President von der Leyen. And that's key because enlargement is a whole of the Commission policy. We can do a lot of things in DG NEAR. We can entertain the countries and keep them busy, but we cannot get them into the EU without the support of the entire Commission. So that is, I think, very important, a very important signal, and I think can really make a difference in the way enlargement is being looked at within the Commission. Now, on the whole aspect of gradual integration, and you know, this is very much linked to the growth plan that we put forward last year, the growth plan for the Western Balkans. Last year it was only an idea. In the meantime, we have a new financial instrument of 6 billion euros on top of the financial instrument, quite an achievement, also by the co-legislators, Parliament, Council, who were quite fast in decision making. And the growth plan is underpinned by other pillars, in particular the gradual integration into the EU single market, which then is conditional upon stronger regional economic integration. And I think this architecture and this in a way, you call it conditionality, has also been helpful in, for example, unblocking the SEFTA decision-making, because we also, together with our German friends, made very clear that unless the decision-making within SEFTA, which is crucial for the common regional market, is unblocked, also the single market integration might be at risk. Now, has the growth plan worked over the last year? I think our assessment is yes, it has changed and created a new dynamic within the region. The leaders themselves wanted to meet regularly to take stock of the growth plan. And if you take one example, the example of SEPA, the Single Europe Payment Area, something which has been around as an idea for a number of years. Now, again, over the last year, work has dramatically accelerated. We've had a decision now a couple of weeks ago that Montenegro and Albania will join SEPA. We hope to have similar decisions for Serbia, North Macedonia early next year. And this is not just a political decision. This is based on a key alignment on payments, on anti-money laundering, for example. So it shows that the growth plan is not sort of a parallel track, but it is meant to accelerate a key alignment and the accession process.
Just to be sure that I understand correctly, so the gradual integration, so far it's the growth plan, and it's not envisioned to have additional instruments for gradual integration at this point of the strategy.
Well, I think we have all the instruments available through the growth plan, and we'll build on that. We'll use what we have. I mean, we've chosen SEPA not only because it is a tangible instrument, but also because we do not need any new legal instruments to do that. So, and we'll continue this approach where we're working together with our partners and see where they are interested, because gradual integration is not an obligation, it's an offer. So it's not something we're imposing from Brussels. We've made sort of an offer in the growth plan, we've identified a number of areas. in the area of, for example, SEPA, nearly everybody has now accepted or applied for participation in other areas. ACAS, the agreement conformity assessments, for example, it is only Serbia until now that has expressed an interest. So it's again, it's a dialogue. It's an offer and not an obligation.
Thank you. And do you have one main deliverable when it comes to EU enlargement in the Western Balkans for 2025? One focus.
Well, I do hope we'll have a number of chapters being closed with Montenegro and remaining clusters opened with Albania. We also hope to unblock the situation with North Macedonia in the course of next year. And finally, we hope Bosnia-Herzegovina, again, the minister said not easy, but we do hope that we'll be able to also start the formal part of the negotiations with Bosnia and Herzegovina next year.
Thank you. Last question. We ahead of the European Council summit, we have a EU Western Balkans summit next week. Do you have any specific expectations from that?
Yeah, first, I think it is an important signal to have this summit. I think it is the first formal summit with the Western Balkans under the new institutional cycle. Again, as the minister said, there was already an informal dinner early December. So this, as such, is an important and good signal. I would expect that this summit takes stock in particular of the implementation of the growth plan, what has happened over the last year, but also has some forward-looking orientations, what can be done further on gradual integration. So the summit as such is not about enlargement, it's really about the engagement and how we can work together more closely. Enlargement as such will be dealt with hopefully at the General Affairs Council, where again we look forward to having some positive enlargement conclusions being adopted next week.
Thank you very much. Before opening the floor, I will turn to my colleague Milan. And I would also like you to give us your take, your analysis for the next year. Maybe on the one hand, how do you see, given that we have a second Trump presidency coming in very soon, how do you see the EU and member states prepare for this with the focus on the policy in the Western Balkans? And also, who do you see maybe to take leadership? What do you see in this regard, given the disunity that we currently see among member states? And of course, feel free to reply to the previous speakers as well.
Thank you. Very good morning. Great to see some friends and familiar names. I will try to be quick because I don't know how many other questions you have in store. But look, I think it's fair to say that this year, 2024, was very rich in achievements on enlargement. A lot of progress there and so on. But when we look forward, next year will certainly be there will be more turmoil. There will be much more sort of geopolitical distractions, and also it's fair to say that there is lack of, in the short term at least, lack of big gains for the more advanced countries. Next year, and by the way, I want to really praise the Commission, how they found a creative way, for instance, this year, how to do screenings with Ukraine and Moldova. Hasn't been done before. But because next year there will be, I think, more disruptions on the ground in the Western Balkans. Look at Serbia, Kosovo already. Because there will be lack of attention. We will have, like now, crisis in Syria and so on, turning away attention. Lack in also crisis in the eastern neighborhood with Georgia. I think we will need more fixes. We will also have less engaged US to do some crisis diplomacy prevention, deterrence to some adventurous moves from Belgrade or elsewhere. So I think Commission will we'll need to look beyond the growth plan and beyond the chapters closed and clusters, and come up with, maybe under gradual integration, with either sectors that can that these more advanced countries in the Western Balkans can be connected to the single market with some tangible benefits to their populations. But Thomas, as we discussed the other day, it will not be, Commission cannot do it alone. It will need political support for member states, because on many things they will face some vested interest in the member states. And it will also need maybe some encouragement, push, or public demand, not only from the candidate countries, but also from the member states. And if you look on domestic politics in France and Germany nowadays, Germany moving to elections, next government there, they will have several big issues to deal with. Next German chancellor on big issues, I just listed it out. So Trump and trade, U.S. unilateralism, U.S. in NATO and European security, the U.S.-Russia talks on ceasefire in Ukraine, and some kind of settlement without clear role for the EU. The Western Balkans will be a side issue, and people here in this call are well aware that we can be only a few days away from the next Serbia-Kosovo crisis. And this is where the new US administration comes. They will be, with Trump's style and proximity to some leaders, US will be more transactional. They will have a preferred relationship with some leaders. There will be more stabilitocracy. There will be much less US pressure on rule of law, anti-corruption programs. So it will all undermine the EU accession process. We have moving together with American diplomacy also this year. This will be different. The Quint will probably not work. So, and on Serbia and Kosovo, I think the not well-functioning US facilitation will be even more important. Therefore, the new Commission and the High Representative Kallas will also have this role, how to change approach on this normalization. And unfortunately, more disruptions, maybe also internally in Bosnia and Herzegovina from Dodik, means that there will be less sort of good regional situation. And as you know, Serbia-Kosovo tensions have repercussions in this region. Everything is connected. And especially Montenegro would have difficulties to move forward, focus on its EU agenda, if they will be domestic crises on identity issues. It's good that Prime Minister Spajic a few days ago proposed this agenda for EU to have all members of the coalition, including Serbian parties, to sign. But it's very easy to disrupt. So staying the course, I see two parallel processes: staying the course for EU accession, but also external situation which will be much more conducive to disrupt. And I don't see who can step in from the member states at the moment to replace the US role. I think we will have to wait for the new German government and hope that there will be capacity. Anna, also for your successor, maybe it will be, let's see how the elections go. Maybe it's your party as well, to be more engaged and to do this crisis management that I think your colleague Manuel Zaracin did very well. Whenever there was a crisis, he said on the plane, went there, talked to the leaders. This was more engaged Germany that I have seen on the Western Balkans, but we need a coalition of other member states to do this, which is not enlargement per se. It is more political engagement and using enlargement also to do some heavy lifting or to press some buttons and do more leverage, like on CEFTA and on Kosovo lifting up trade blockade on Serbia.
We have have the Polish presidency coming up, council presidency coming up. We have seen that there were some attempts not focusing on the Western Balkans, but by Donald Tusk to gather some especially Nordic, Baltic, Eastern European countries to form some cohesion on when it comes to foreign policy. How do you see this to play out in the future, maybe in terms of a more a stronger leadership coming from Warsaw?
Yeah, I think Polish presidency will really, the priority will be on EU enlargement to open the cluster with first cluster with Ukraine, Moldova, and to close some chapters with Montenegro. It will get more difficult. More difficult chapters are coming from Montenegro. So let's see what they can achieve. In terms
of leadership, when it comes to EU foreign policy, do you see there a stronger role by Tusk, the way that he's trying to position himself, especially gathering support by other countries? We saw a summit coming up, maybe in the form of Weimar, even though Germany and France are weakened, the governments at the moment.
I think Polish presidency will be focused on one thing: security, defense, and sort of coordinating the EU response to Trump. Everything else will come later. And again, on enlargement, they are more engaged. I see Polish diplomacy more engaged on the Balkans than before. Marta will maybe, maybe agree, but I don't see them. I think Ukraine, Moldova, especially with elections in Moldova and the crisis in Georgia, will take. This will be on top. So Eastern countries.
Thanks very much. We are going to open the floor, and I would first give the floor to Marta, who was already mentioned, Marta Szpala, Senior Research Fellow at Center for Eastern Studies in Warsaw, and ask you this question as you are closer to the Polish presidency, let's say. And as Milan mentioned, the program is framed under a broad security umbrella. So how do you see the Western Balkans and enlargement more broadly feature in this? What are your expectations? And of course, also, if you have any questions to the speakers, feel free to add them. And everybody else, if you have any questions, please raise your hand or use the chat function. When you ask your question, please briefly introduce yourself and keep the question short, and then we will afterwards give it back to the panel. Thank you. Marta, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for invitation. And of course, as Milan said, our the main priority of Polish presidency is security, but we see enlargement policy as a tool to enhance security in the closest neighborhood of the EU. That's why enlargement as such will be a priority, but maybe not, which maybe not be seen like that from the like what we get from the government right now. And also, of course, like Poland was always one of the greatest support of the EU enlargement policy. We have the compromise, we have the consensus on that among the political elite, but also among the society. And this is really important. Like actually 80% of the Polish society is for enlargement, which is also important and gives government a lot of opportunities to have active policy. Of course, we were always more engaged in the Eastern countries than in the Balkans, but I would say that Polish presidency will try to have this kind of balance between the two. We are also very keen on seeing progress in the enlargement path of the Western Balkan countries. There are some high-level visits from Poland to the region coming soon. So yeah, this diplomatic engagement will be there. I would say that what is also for us important, because yes, we mentioned a lot of let's say progress on technical level in the past few years in terms of enlargement in the Western Balkans, but we really would like to speed up the process, but which is merit-based process with strict conditionality, especially when we are speaking about the rule of law. And even if we speak about a gradual integration and single market, like single market is based on the rule of law. So we can't skip that, it won't speed up the process, because we see that in all Western Balkan countries, we have very huge problems with rule of law, and that issue should be addressed. And this is personal opinion. This is not the opinion about Polish presidency, but I think like EU really should be more vocal about what is happening in various Western Balkans in terms of rule of law. And of course, what we would like to see, it's like more alignment in terms of common security and foreign policy, which is also important, as it's like we are in this process that we really have to have unity on that. There will be, it's like when we are talking about the speeding up the process, Poland was together with V4 countries was always against the bilateralization of the enlargement process, and we'd like also to work on that to overcome this problem. We have the great experience with Polish-German reconciliation, and we really don't think that EU enlargement policy or EU negotiation is the place where we should face this kind of challenging and very complicated issue, and we rather should look for the solution how to not include such an issue in negotiation, because it undermines the credibility of the process. What I would say that what is worries us, yes, Frauke mentioned that we are closely cooperating with the Baltics and Nordic states because we are on the same page. We want we want enlargement to move forward, but as I said, based on the clear and strict conditionality. But we are also afraid about, let's say, situation in the EU as such, especially it's like, we really speak about instability, political instability in the Western Balkans now. It will be quite a challenge to have a common ground in the Weimar Triangle with weakened government both in France and Germany. That's why I think that the main focus will be not on the internal reform of the EU, but rather to have candidate countries enlargement clarity and to support the reform process there, because this is what we can do. And I don't think in current circumstances in the EU that we have a space and political leadership to discuss really internal reform. I would say what will also be very important for us to have the unity in the EU when we are speaking about the enlargement policy, but also policies towards different regional challenges like Kosovo-Serbian dialogue, reform in Bosnia, because we see that this process, like we didn't have that consistency from the different member states concerning how to address this kind of problems. And as Milan mentioned, with Trump in power, really have to be united on some issue and what we would like to achieve and how. So I would say
Thanks a lot for these insights from Warsaw. And I think one of the biggest questions is, and Milan touched upon this as well, that there is this lack of unity within the member states, and we have obviously Hungary as a very distinct spoiler, and especially also when it comes to, for example, visiting Georgia on the eve of elections. But also among the other member states, we see a lack of cohesion. Of course, we have malign forces also inside the EU member states, and given that the Western Balkans will not be in focus in the next years, this might, of course, have an impact on the enlargement policy as such, but also more broadly on developments in the region. I would also like to play this back to the speakers. in the final answer round, when it comes to questions of bilateralization, how possibly the new Commission can mitigate this disunity to a certain extent. Will we, for example, see a new envoy for the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia? This would be interesting. Also, maybe for Milan, more the next German government. Also, given that the parliament has played quite a big role when it comes to the Western Balkans in this past legislature. But we are not sure how many of those who are driving this will be in the next parliament, given the types of mandates that they had. We also have some questions in the chat. I see one first by Romale Kinou, who has some problems with the microphone. I will read it out then. So Romale Kinou is Program and Advocacy Manager at the Brussels-based TEPSA Institute. His question is to Mr. Hagleitner, and he would like to know if Mr. Hagleitner sees any disconnection between a certain enthusiasm from the EU Commission and more skeptical EU member states, as many seem hesitant, if not reluctant, to speed up the enlargement process. This is directed to Mr. Hagleitner. And then we have Berta. Berta, you also don't want to ask your question directly, right?
So yeah, I'm Berta Lopez, Policy Analyst at the European Policy Center, following the Western Balkans and EU enlargement. And well, as I wrote in the chat, my question is especially directed to Anna Lührmann, but also I'm happy to hear the analysis by other panelists. And it's basically given that the recently elected Enlargement Commissioner Marta Kos has already endorsed and said that the time frame that Montenegro has set for itself is realistic, so that they will finish accession negotiations by 2026 and hence be ready to join the EU by 2028. Do you think from your German perspective that this is realistic? What is your view on this time frame, and also from the Council perspective? So based on your understanding of the positions of other member states, do you think that the Council is ready to endorse such time frame, provided and assuming that Montenegro does its homework and really fulfills all the criteria by 2026? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Berta. I see also a question by Tanya. Tanya, do you prefer me to read it out, or could you also ask it live? It's a very long question. I don't want to make
as you prefer. I can also do it very quickly, if you don't mind.
Please. No,
so,
please,
yeah.
Please.
Oh, yeah, so yeah, I'm Tanya Bošković, GIZ project leader with quite some, let's say, history supporting Western Balkans government in aligning to establish common regional market, and now in the context of new growth plan to bring them closer to single market. I just wonder, as Milan or Mr. Nietzsche mentioned, that in a context of expecting geopolitical interruptions being more even dominant from next year, the EU Commission should look even beyond chapter alignment, beyond new growth plan instruments that are now available. I just wonder how you see this being different from sectoral integration that you introduced, you mentioned, given that also new growth plan ACA is really based on sectoral integration in line with the acquis and implementation of acquis. Is there something different that you had in mind as approach, or I didn't get it clearly? Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else at this point? I mean, we already have quite a lot. Otherwise, I would play it back to the speakers. Maybe the first question was to Mr. Hagleitner, then Ms. Lührmann, and then Milan. That's okay. Yes.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, I'll probably, well, the question on member states, enthusiasm on member states, not sure Commission were necessarily best placed. No, but seriously, I think first, I mean, all these decisions I've mentioned before have been done by member states, so they have agreed. And I do think that you know, we see a certain shift of how should I say, in the sense of urgency as well on the side of member states. I mean, we've had long hours of discussion in co-repair over the last days and weeks, and at least I notice a certain shift there in some of the positions. I also think for example, European Council President is also looking forward to a discussion on enlargement. So there is not any reluctance to engage in the area of enlargement, and I would challenge a little bit, what was said, and I think Frauke, we also said that there are risks to be neglect of the Western Balkans. I don't really see it like that, because I think enlargement as such is a priority. And we have one enlargement policy. We don't have an enlargement policy for the Western Balkans, another one for Ukraine and Moldova. We have one enlargement policy. So I do think enlargement, for a lot of reasons, will remain very high on the agenda. That means, therefore, that also enlargement with the Western Balkans will remain high on the agenda, and that those countries who want to use this opportunity and momentum are able to move forward. And I think that is key. And I think really this, you also asked how realistic it is. For example, or I see a question was asked to Mrs. Lührmann, but the target of Montenegro and Albania. I mean, it is obviously, it's very ambitious, and as I said, it is their target, but I think it has an incredibly mobilizing effect as well on an administration if they set themselves such targets. And we also see it has an effect on neighboring countries. They're all looking at each other, and I think that shouldn't be underestimated either. I think I do, and I fully agree with Milan that Montenegro, of course, is fragile, can easily be destabilized, etc. But if a country such as Montenegro were to move decisively forward towards EU membership, it will have a tremendous impact in the rest of the region.
Thank you, Lührmann.
Yes, indeed. I mean, super ambitious, 28, but I would say doable if really the reforms are implemented at full speed, and also at the same time we as EU do our homework and get ready for enlargement. Because I often hear, okay, but Montenegro is only such a small country, what does the EU need to do? Maybe it's not, we don't have to do these big discussions about budget because of Montenegro's accession, but about voting rights we have to talk about, because that's another veto player around the table. And I think we have enough problems with individual countries delaying our progress, including our progress on enlargement as we stand. And therefore, I believe we urgently need this debate, and we also need this debate actually to make enlargement happening, because we currently see, you mentioned this a couple of times with this, I think almost too weak of a word, this bilateralization, right? I mean, what we basically see is that individual EU member states take the whole EU and our geostrategic interests hostage for either gains in negotiation in other arenas, actually, right? Or for bilateral historical issues. And this really needs to stop. We need to be able to act as EU according to our geostrategic interests, our values. And therefore, I strongly advocate for a reduction of the number of veto points during the enlargement process. We have a proposal on the table here to bring these veto points down. As you know, there's a tremendous amount of unanimous decisions that need to be taken until a country can become a member of the EU, around 100, depending on how you count. can even count more. So this needs to go down. We need to, of course, in the end, have a unanimous decision on whether a country can join the EU or not. But the process needs to be faster and needs to be really driven according to the rules that we set ourselves and not by bilateral issues.
If I can just ask a quick question, because we've had this discussion also with Mr. Hagleitner very recently here in Brussels, and when you talk to the member states, there seems to be very little appetite actually to move forward with this. So you say it must stop, but what if it doesn't stop? Is there an alternative in your view?
Well, I think as in many things in the EU, if we don't make progress, we try to enlarge the negotiation package, and I think we need to put this very high on the agenda and make sure that we get this solved. Otherwise, we also lose our credibility as EU. And we've actually seen a bit of momentum towards this initiative, at least before the summer, and I hope that now we can pick it up again, also with the new Commission.
Thank you. Milan, and then afterwards we'll have one final round. If you have any questions, please raise your hands already.
Tanya, to your question, thank you for that sector integration, where to, what to do more. I would say across the board, especially to change the track when we are discussing in the EU about the candidate countries, if they can be engaged, invited to some formats of the council, some working groups, when they can participate in some discussions before they are linked sectorally, that would be great. The sectoral integration will be very difficult. So also the gradual integration, where to integrate them. So I think where we can do more than summit with the leaders, EU, Western Balkan summit, but invite them on the ministerial level, on the working group level, and yes, then Thomas' work will be hard because he will be facing whatever the legal services of the council and others. But I think we have to try, because chapters will not only will not help the. I mean, the whole chapters will not help the administrations of these countries to get closer and to get more integrated. And the whole point of front loading something, some advantages and benefits, is also changing psychology that some of the candidate countries, the more advanced ones, could be part of our discussions. And then one more thing, somebody mentioned that it's no longer the Western Balkan region and the Eastern region. Everything is related. All the momentum in the enlargement now is linked to Ukraine, but also I want to draw our attention to what's going on in Georgia. Disruptions can come up also from other candidate countries. Any day, developments in Georgia can go very bloody, and some of the people in this call will be signing an open letter to also to your boss, Minister Annalena Baerbock, who is inviting E5 ministers to Berlin for Thursday to discuss, coordinate joint response on what's happening in Georgia, which is very closely linked to EU integration there.
Thank you. I'll give the floor to Marta, and also a question to those people who asked the questions before. Are you happy with your answers? Do you need another answer? Otherwise, we will have a final round.
Okay, I rather have like one comment to what Milan said and one question. Like, comment is about like inviting political leaders to the EU meetings. Like, how do you think it will help the situation when we now see that the main obstacle for the reform and enlargement is actually political elites in both regions? Like in Georgia, it's like quite obvious. Society wants to be in the EU, wants the reform, but the political elites are against. And this is the same in Serbia and other countries. Like they are perfectly okay what is happening. We see that society wants to have the rule of law, like now in Serbia on the streets, and inviting them, it will only give them visibility and legitimacy from the EU. So this is my question. How do you think it will help? And the second question is rather to our German partners. How do you see what will be the future policy, the policy of the future government in Germany towards enlargement? We see that there is a big, like, society is not in favor. The political parties who will be in power will be like also more reluctant to have new members inside the EU. So how do you see what will Germany policy would be in the future?
Thank you very much, Marta. Do we have any urgent last questions? We are nearing the end. I see nothing. I just want to add one more point to the discussion. Mr. Hagleitner already mentioned the mission letters, and one very central piece of all the mission letters for the new Commission is better communication, also based on the results of the conference on the future of Europe, more citizen engagement, because as we know, enlargement is decided in the member states, and in some member states, this even requires the people to be on board in certain situations. So this will be a very crucial task for the member states as well, and where we see a lot of room for improvement. And I would like to now give the floor back. First, I think we had a question to Milan, then maybe Mr. Hagleitner and Ms. Lührmann, and maybe as a last point, as one advice, if there's one advice or one demand or one suggestion for 2025 when it comes to Western Balkan enlargement that you want to end with. Milan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Marta. That's the big dilemma, but I believe they should be invited and reminded of what is the EU way of dealing with things. So civil society can see that the majority of member states or institutions are allies, are on their side. It's if you have state capture in Serbia or elsewhere, the way to proceed is not to ignore or isolate the leader or the state elite, especially if you need good neighbor relations and good regional situation. It's to engage with them, but be consistent and have clear messages, this was lacking.
Any specific advice either to the German government, to the EU for the next year? Some main demands, some main focus that is maybe not yet there?
My worry is that the next German government will have one single issue looking at the Western Balkans, at least on the short term, which is migration. And I think they should be encouraged to invest more time and political energy to create a coalition of the willing, to speed up enlargement or integration with especially with the more advanced countries in the Western Balkans.
Thank you, Mr. Hagleitner.
Yeah, very briefly, on the question political elites versus citizens, I mean, I think it's a fair point, and I think those really interested in joining the union in the region are largely citizens and businesses, and because both of them know what the cost of not being part of the union is. I think we really need to build on that in terms of the communication, the outreach, and we are trying to step it up through also the growth plan, with its specific obligations as well in terms of communication. And you might have heard as well, our new Commissioner Kos is very committed to stepping up the communication on enlargement, both in the region and within EU member states. Now, if one piece of advice, if I can, we're always good in giving advice in the Commission. to our enlargement partners in the region, I would really say stay focused and make use of the momentum for 25. I think that really is key. Thanks a lot for having invited me.
Thanks a lot, State Minister Lührmann. Last words.
Yeah, I have to speak briefly about Georgia. I mean, we are supposed to focus on the Western Balkans, but because the issue was raised, and I'm deeply, deeply concerned by the situation in Georgia. And the German government has condemned the attacks on peaceful protesters really in the strongest terms. Annalena Baerbock has also issued a statement, I think on Friday on the Weimar Triangle format, where she really calls upon Georgian Dream to stop these indiscriminate attacks, and also to return on an EU pathway. Currently, we see that the country is moving away from the EU, and I think we also need to have a debate about suspension of the candidate status, because it's very clear that it's the Georgian Dream currently does not pursue this pathway. So yeah, I just want to maybe end with this on the questions of the future German government. I mean, look, we have elections coming up, so I don't want to preclude them. The election manifestos are just being developed as we speak. It's very clear that the Green Party, a pro-European course and a pro-enlargement course, will be very much in the focus also of our manifesto. And from my debates in the parliament, I can actually tell you and reassure you that the democratic parts of the German party system are very much behind the goal of EU enlargement and also EU reform. We had a very, very big cross-party unity here, of course, with some emphasis. And I would, of course, argue, since I'm in the middle of the campaign already, that the Green Party is the one that has Europe most at its core, or as it's at its heart. But I wouldn't expect a major shift in course, even under another government on this issue.
Thank you very much. With this happy note from Berlin, I would like to thank everyone for joining our event today. The Balkan Breakfast Series, as you know, is part of DGAP's ongoing project on EU enlargement in the Western Balkans, and will continue next year, so stay tuned. Thanks a lot to the speakers who took the time during this very, very busy period. Also to our great events team at DGAP for facilitating the meeting. And I wish everyone a happy week, a happy holiday season, and I look forward to seeing everyone next year.
Thank you. Thank you. All the best.